Welcome to another special edition of PFTPM, Friday afternoon, January 30. Here's something that came out of nowhere, unexpected. Now, there were indications that there may be issues, but we're nearly 4 weeks removed from the last game of the regular season. The Minnesota Vikings, who ended the year on a 5-game winning streak, have fired general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. He arrived 4 years ago with Kevin O'Connell, and both men got contract extensions after the 2024 season, one that came within one regular season game of the number 1 seed in the NFC. O'Connell got his extension first. Adofo-Mensah's came later, and that was the first hint as to the relative prioritization of the two guys within the organization. Here's the problem, though. When the offseason unfolded and the Vikings were figuring out their quarterback plan for 2025, this is my interpretation, driven mainly by the outcome, but also we've hinted at some of this stuff. There's been some stuff dating back to last March when people who were dealing with the Vikings, when we were waiting to see what they were going to do about the quarterback position, were saying, we don't know who's calling the shots. We don't know who's making the decisions. At the end of the day, the Vikings had various choices. They could have kept Sam Darnold. They could have kept Daniel Jones. They could have said yes to the reported overtures from Aaron Rodgers. They could have, and they did, go with J.J. McCarthy and then have backups behind him. Remember, they traded for Sam Howell. That didn't work out. He got retraded after the preseason. The Vikings ultimately went into the regular season with Carson Wentz as the veteran backup to J.J. McCarthy, and Wentz showed up less than 2 weeks before the first regular season game. The indications were and are, and the outcome supports the idea that O'Connell wanted something more behind J.J. McCarthy, that O'Connell possibly wanted McCarthy to sit another year. The tension, though, came from the fact that McCarthy was drafted 10th overall. Remember, they traded up from number 11 to number 10 because there was concern they were going to get a leapfrog, possibly by the Broncos at number 12, who took Bo Nix and acted like they wanted him all along, which is always a smart way to sell your draft pick. It's a guy we wanted all along. It's a guy we would have taken if we had the first overall pick. Regardless, the Vikings felt compelled to jump up 1, went to 10, got McCarthy. He played one preseason game in 2024, and then he's the guy in 25. And the argument was, we got to see what we have. Let's see. Let's go. But the one guy in position to know best, the one guy who had evaluated J.J. McCarthy throughout the 2024 offseason program, training camp, up until he got injured, you got to make a projection. Is this guy ready? Is he ready to be the week 1 starter in 25? Or do we need another veteran who can compete with him at a minimum or be installed as the presumed starter at most? So, and as I was putting together the list of hot spots as the regular season was coming to a conclusion, I mentioned the Vikings a couple of times from the standpoint not of O'Connell, but whoever it was that made the final call on no to Darnold, no to Jones, no to Rodgers. The fact that O'Connell stays and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah goes tells us that was a general manager's call. Now, why did it take so long? There's a couple of different theories we can get into. The simplest is it was a slow, careful, deliberate review with many factors considered and meetings and discussions and contemplation about possibilities. But still, does it take nearly 4 weeks since the last regular season game to come to the conclusion as to who wanted J.J. McCarthy plus available backups, journeyman? Didn't they already know that? I assume they knew it last year when it was time for the folks to say, here's what I want. And for Adofo-Mensah to say, let's go with McCarthy, O'Connell to say, let's not, Adofo-Mensah wins, and then it all plays out. There's a couple of other factors here that intrigue me. One, is it as simple as Sam Darnold made it to the Super Bowl And the Vikings had previously decided to stay the course, but with Darnold making it to the Super Bowl and playing as well as he did against the Rams on Sunday, someone with equity in the team decided, I just can't do this. I can't in good conscience keep Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in charge of the organization. And his draft record has not been good. That's something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. We'll go back at some point and do a deep dive into all the picks. The draft record under Adofo-Mensah has not been stellar, to say the least. So maybe they were thinking, let's just wait. Let's play it out. Let's give him another year. And then Darnold goes to the Super Bowl and everything changes. The other way to look at this, and this is next level cynical, but I thought of this a few minutes before we started taping this. What the Vikings have done in firing Kwesi Adofo-Mensah now, instead of searching for a general manager now, they're going to put Rob Brzezinski, who's been with the team forever, mainly cap and contracts guy. He's been there forever. He's going to lead the front office through the 2026 draft. Now, words like building consensus are in the team's statement, and that term has been used in the past for others who weren't true football people, true scouts or coaches who ended up in charge of the front office. I remember it happening with Mike Tannenbaum when he became the GM of the Jets. His skill is building consensus. So he's the captain of the ship. You've got the scouts, the director of college scouting, the director of pro scouting, all the other people who are responsible for evaluating available players and making recommendations. You've got the coaching staff, and you've got one person who helps bring it all together and get everyone on the same page about what the organization is going to do. That's what Brzezinski is ostensibly going to do. It could be O'Connell's just in charge. It could be that O'Connell has won a power play here and that he is now basically the Bill Belichick of the Minnesota Vikings. And that after the draft, they're going to hire a VP of player personnel or someone with the GM title who isn't really the GM, and that person's going to essentially answer to Kevin O'Connell. That's possible. But by waiting nearly a month, the Vikings have managed to kick the can on all of this until after the draft. They already have their scouts in place. They already have their front office in place. The only thing here is removing the person who was making decisions, and the biggest one ended up being a bust. That person is now removed from the equation, and nothing else is going to be changed or disrupted until after the next draft. So there's no search until after the next draft. Now, if you fire Kwesi Adofo-Mensah the day after the season ends, I don't think you can pull that off. I don't think you can issue a statement and say, well, you know what, Rob Brzezinski is going to run the front office until after the draft, and then we'll hire a GM then. There's some sensitivity, although given the current climate, not as much as there used to be, about compliance with the Rooney Rule. And I think that's a fair question that's going to come up here. Is this an end run by the Vikings, pressing pause on any search that would be fully compliant with all rules and regulations until after the draft? That could come up. And maybe waiting nearly a month was part of the effort to keep that from happening. And maybe they work with the league office. I don't know. I'm just interpreting possibilities based upon the facts that have been presented to us. And the fact that is presented to us as of right now, nearly 4 weeks after they last played a game, the Vikings have no general manager and will not be looking for one until after the draft, with Brzezinski running the front office, O'Connell entrenched as the coach, and we'll see where it goes from here. But it definitely makes a topsy-turvy offseason a little more topsy-turvy as we get toward the end of January and move closer and closer to the scouting combine, the draft, and the rest of the 2026 NFL offseason. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next from San Francisco for Super Bowl week, Monday, noon Eastern, on Peacock, NBCSN, and SiriusXM 85. Have a great weekend. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.